Gracie Jiu Jitsu rocks. Welcome to the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Rocks podcast, a podcast dedicated to Gracie Jiu Jitsu and all things Gracie, including self-defense, competition, anti-bullying, women's self-defense and empowerment, nutrition, and most especially, the people involved in Gracie Jiu Jitsu. This podcast is for the average Joe. It's for anyone who practices, trains, teaches, or just loves to talk about or hear about Gracie Jiu Jitsu. We'll explore the lives of Gracie Jiu Jitsu practitioners, how they got involved in the art, and what effect it's had on their lives. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to episode 77 of the Gracie Jiu Jitsu Rocks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Marty Josie, and thanks for listening. Got a great show for you today, and let's start it off with a quote. A journey of 1,000 submissions begins with submitting your ego. And that is from Anonymous. I'm not sure where exactly that quote came from, but I think it's a really great one. It all starts with getting rid of the ego. Everything great happens from there. Okay, my guest today is Jon Wagner, aka Jonny Wags, among other titles and nicknames. And Jon is a BJJ black belt and certified instructor through the Gracie Academy. He's a very interesting guy, and during the interview he discusses everything from transitioning from the military, his many trips to Brazil, how the mat has become a sanctuary for him, the effect that having his son had on his jiu-jitsu, self-defense philosophy, completing the instructor certification program, and attending the Jiu Jitsu Lifestyle Summit, as well as other topics. So I know you're going to enjoy the interview. After the interview, make sure you stay tuned for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment, where my guest host today is Chris Bailey, owner and head instructor of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Scottsdale. Okay, without further ado, let's talk to Jon now. Okay, I'm speaking with Jon Wags, and welcome to the show, Jon.
Thank you so much, Martin. It's an honor to be on your show. I love your show.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. It's an honor for me to be talking to you. So to get us going, Jon, let's talk a little about something I saw recently on Chris Bailey's Facebook page, and I thought it was very interesting. And the post was, so thanks to my friend Jonny Wags, I heard music in stereo for the very first time in my life yesterday. I felt like someone seeing in color for the first time. How amazing is technology? Thanks, bro. So if you would, tell us a little bit about that. It seems really intriguing and very exciting. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, they have these headphones that use bone conduction technology to transmit the sound so that you can kind of hear what's going on around you. And I saw an ad for him a while back. And, Chris and I have known each other for a while now. And he's just an amazing guy. And he is always giving to people. And he's the kind of guy that never expects anything in return. And he has helped me a lot in this whole transition into the self-defense realm. And I just am, kind of looking for a way to give back to him whenever I get a chance. And I saw those and, I thought maybe this kind of thing might work for him. I didn't know. But I showed it to him and just kind of without saying anything, I just got it for him. And he tried them out, and it was crazy. It was like seeing somebody see in color for the first time or something, because he just got really quiet and just was like, had this expression on his face. Like he was just amazed. He was just blown away, listening to one of his favorite bands for the first time in stereo. And it was a really beautiful experience for me, like to see him, and he was so appreciative, of course. just to see somebody like him get to experience that. And because I guess like his inner ear works on that side, but it just doesn't necessarily have access to it because of a birth defect. And he's a music fan, and so for him it was just a huge thing to be able to hear in stereo, and just the look on his face was incredible. Man, it was a blessing.
That's really great, man. That's super awesome. I saw that and I was like, wow, I gotta hear more about that, because what a great gift that is. And like you said, Chris is an amazing person and awesome instructor, very giving person. So yeah, wonderful.
I felt lucky that I could give him something, because he's always giving to me and other people, and it was just, I felt lucky that I found it, or that the ad came up and I was able to give him something back to him.
Yeah, very cool, man. Very cool. So let's back up for a second, Jon, and talk about your background, your journey, how you got started in martial arts and jiu-jitsu. I believe you did a little boxing before discovering jiu-jitsu. So just tell us how that unfolded, who introduced you to jiu-jitsu, and then kind of where that led.
Sure, yeah. It was a long journey, but, I grew up playing hockey, and, we would always we would call it locker boxing in the locker room, after hockey practice, and just throw gloves and the helmet on and box each other. And then when I was in high school, and I got bullied a little bit growing up because I was always a bigger kid, but I didn't have, the mentality of an older kid. So I looked much older than I was, but I, mentally and psychologically, I was younger. And so I got bullied, and I kind of had a chip on my shoulder, I guess. And so I went to a boxing gym when I moved to Arizona, and I started training back in high school. And then when I joined the military, I tried out for the boxing team at Fort Hood, and I made the team, and it's amateur boxing. It's nothing serious, but I liked it. I liked the competitiveness of it, and I just kind of I was into the fighting aspect of it, I guess. But the thing with boxing is I would get headaches all the time, after training, and it was just kind of normal to me back then, but I wouldn't enjoy it so much after a while. I just kind of, everything hurt all the time and my head hurt. And when I joined the military, they had just implemented the Army Combatives program, which is kind of it's a condensed version a little bit of the combatives, because they only have a couple of weeks to train us. I was a scout in the military, and, that was the first kind of time that I had really been shown really the effectiveness of grappling or jiu-jitsu. And, they had us, do little competitions in training, and man, I just kind of got hooked. And once I got sent to my unit in Texas, I just went on a mission to find a school to learn more. And really, really luckily, fortunately for me, I found a guy named Phil Cardella. He's a black belt now under Helson Gracie, and he's just an amazing guy, just a small guy with incredible jiu-jitsu. And that was my first time rolling with somebody that was legit at jiu-jitsu. Before that, it was just, drill sergeants that knew some moves and stuff. But once I met Phil, I drove down there. It was like a 2-hour drive from the base, but I would drive down there whenever I could and get lessons with him. And then after I got out of the military, I moved back to Arizona, and I went to Brazil a week after I got out. And with the help of Phil, I went down there and made some connections, and to get away from the kind of the chaos that I experienced in civilian life. The transition was kind of hard for me getting out. Mm-hmm. So, going to Brazil was almost like an escape for me. And jiu-jitsu kind of became this therapy, this escape from, just dealing with the stuff that I had no idea that I was going to be dealing with psychologically. And coming back from the war, it was just the mat was kind of like a little sanctuary for me, where I could kind of work on something that, and my mind wouldn't be occupied. My mind wouldn't be like elsewhere. It was just like I could empty out my mind and just kind of let my body kind of work. And so I started going to Brazil because I needed like some more space, and nobody knew me there. So I just went there, started trained a lot, and started competing a lot. And, you know, I was really young, and I competed like there was no tomorrow. I competed like every chance I got.
So really threw myself into it.
Yeah, I really threw myself into it, and I eventually got my black belt from Gustavo Dantas in Arizona, and my buddies in Brazil gave me a black belt as well from the Kimura Novo União team there, and some really just amazing guys, and that whole journey was really good for me psychologically, but also it kind of broke me down physically, you know, because when you're in Brazil training and you're the big white guy in town, you almost have a target on your back.
Sure.
You know, especially on the mats. And it helped my reflexes. It helped my sportive jiu-jitsu chops, so to speak. But it also like broke me down physically. So, you know, I got my black belt about 6 years ago, and I haven't competed in about 2 years since my son was born.
So back up for a second. How long were you in Brazil that initial time?
I've been there. I think I've been there 13 or 14 times.
Wow, that's great.
Since 2005.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's been great. You know, it was really helpful for me psychologically, but I think physically it took its toll.
Yeah. So always feeling like you had a target on your back, feeling like you had to prove yourself over and over again, you know, a constant thing. It's got to wear you down in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And it's good. It's good to an extent, but, you know, I was not thinking about longevity. I was not thinking about, you know, holding my baby boy at that point. You know, I was really young, and I just didn't have any forethought or foresight into what was going to happen with the rest of my life and how that was going to affect me. You know, so different priorities now.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned it being a sanctuary, and I recently read one of your posts on Facebook. I'm going to read it now and just let you kind of respond to it. But it says,
sure.
Jiu-Jitsu gives me peace. Oftentimes, it's the only thing that does. The mat is my sanctuary. It has saved my life, figuratively and literally. Thank you, Elio, for having the guts and discipline to challenge tradition and break the mold. Thank you, Gustavo Dantas, for being brave enough to risk everything to chase your dream and for being a great friend and coach all these years. Thank you, Hiron Gracie and Henner Gracie, for tirelessly spreading jiu-jitsu and giving battle-worn veterans a way to continue this great therapy for long after the body has quit. And thank you, Chris Bailey, for giving me a safe house from my storm. So really great. You really acknowledge a lot of people in that, and it kind of sums up a little bit about what you're talking about as the battle-worn vet and having that mat as the sanctuary.
Yeah, it's funny. There's so many. The amazing thing about jiu-jitsu, I think you probably attest to this, is like the connections that you make. And it's almost not about like the techniques or even the rolling or anything like that, but it's like the connection that you make with someone when you share the mat with them. And you know, they get to know you pretty well just from a few minutes of rolling. And, you know, you're able to open up more to somebody who is sharing the trials and tribulations of pursuing jiu-jitsu mastery with you, and you become comfortable with them. And that's something that, you know, I haven't gotten with anybody outside of jiu-jitsu since I left the military, just because not many people have been through war, but even fewer people have been through the rigors of training jiu-jitsu. And so it's like this little brotherhood. It kind of like replaced that brotherhood that I had before, that I didn't have so much access to, like readily accessibility. You know, I couldn't readily access it anymore. And I still stay in touch with my battle buddies, but, you know, we all live in different states and stuff, you know, in different cities. So I can't talk to them face to face all the time.
Right.
So
Right.
I had a lot of people to thank for that, and thank for this, to have this little sanctuary that kind of allows me to keep my sanity. And, like for veterans with PTSD or not even PTSD, but combat experience and stuff like that, you can come back and kind of feel like you're an outsider. You kind of feel like an alien. It's hard to relate to people. And jiu-jitsu has like given me this little incubator in which I can kind of relate to people, and it allows me to kind of grow and cope with what I'm dealing with on the outside of the mat, like when I'm not on the mat. And, for me, it's been the best therapy. It's been the most consistent and best therapy that I've had access to.
Awesome. So, it is great therapy, and it's a great connector to other people. And and we're also going to talk in a couple minutes about the Jiu Jitsu Life Summit, because I know that you were a part of that and had that probably had a big influence on you as well. But before we get to that, take us back. So you're mainly involved in competition focused jiu-jitsu, going back and forth to Brazil often, and you have your black belt. And what caused you to make, and how did you make the transition from that focus to more the self-defense?
That's a great question. It was a couple of things for me, but it kind of all happened at a similar time, in a similar time frame. Like right around the time I was getting my black belt, I was teaching at a great school in Arizona called Horizons Martial Arts. This guy, Brad Bailey, runs it. He's a black belt under Gustavo as well. And he's got a lot of good students, talented people there, and hard workers. And I remember teaching these people, and almost everybody there competes, and they're such a close team. But there would be people that would come in sometimes and weren't really interested in competing. And the thing that sticks out in my head, the person that sticks out in my head all the time was this guy that came in one time, and his name was Dan. He was a very specialized carotid artery surgeon in Phoenix. And he's like the only person, I guess, in the area that can do this kind of surgery. And so his hands were extremely important to him. And he's this smaller guy, extremely kind, and he really bought in on jiu-jitsu. He signed up his whole family to train, and he was very dedicated, but he ended up having to quit because he was constantly afraid of getting hurt, constantly afraid of hurting his hands. And looking at why he couldn't train anymore, I was upset at myself, because here's this guy who can help a lot of people. I mean, he saves lives. He's an emergency surgeon for arteries, and he really wants to learn jiu-jitsu to help learn to protect himself and to stay fit. And I couldn't do anything to help him. Like I worked with him as much as I could, hey, let's do private lessons, or, I'll really gentle people to roll with you or whatever. But at the end of the day, I couldn't give him what he needed to continue training jiu-jitsu. And to me, he needed jiu-jitsu more than anybody I had ever met, because, he had a lot he had a family, he had a career, he's not a big guy. He's not intimidating at all. He had kind of he's so friendly that I'm sure that there would be people that might want to take advantage of him at some point, take his things or whatever. And here's this guy I couldn't do anything for. And I started thinking about that constantly. It bothered me a lot that I couldn't help the guy. And around that same time, I found out I was going to be a father. And I started thinking about that, and all the kids that I had seen quit, all the people that I had seen quit jiu-jitsu. I started thinking, like, you know what, eventually my son is probably going to want to quit jiu-jitsu. I have wanted to quit before. The only reason I stayed was because without it, I would be lost. Like I have quit for small periods of time before, and I just, I become a recluse. I don't socialize at all. Without jiu-jitsu, I lose myself. So I only stayed in it because I really needed it. But for my son and for many, many people, they don't need jiu-jitsu as badly as I do, or as some people do, and they can easily walk away. But in reality, they need it more than anybody. So I started thinking, like, what can I teach these people, and what can I do for my son that if I can only teach him for 6 months, what can I show him that is going to help him for the rest of his life? If I could only teach him 10 or 20 or 30 techniques, what would I show him? And, you know, I started working on that problem a lot. And soon thereafter, I saw Hiron compete in Metamoris and against Andre Galvão, who is a monster competitor. I mean, for those who don't know him, I think he had the highest submission rate in the IBJJF at the time.
Wow.
He was a killer.
Yes.
Yeah. And I had trained with him, and he, of course, just destroyed me. And, I think at the point when I had trained with him, I had won like nationals. I had won like a IBJJF World Masters Championship. So I was decent, I was good. And he just destroyed me. And then I saw him go up against this kid, Hiron, who never competes. And I was like, oh, he's going to destroy this guy. And Hiron's jiu-jitsu was just so efficient. Like when I was watching, I was like, what? He's doing something that I didn't recognize.
Wow.
And, and that just piqued my interest. And then it just so happened that he is he's one of the representatives, the global representatives for self-defense jiu-jitsu and self-preservation jiu-jitsu, And so I started reading some of what he had written online and kind of thinking about his philosophy more and more. And the combination of those events kind of started nudging me in the right direction. And then after my son was born, I just decided, like, I got to do this, like, full speed. Like, I need to be prepared so that when my son is old enough, I can help him the way that I wanted to help all these other people that I've seen quit over the years. And if he wants to learn sport jiu-jitsu later in life, or like whenever, he can ask me, and I will gladly, happily show him my game.
Right.
All the tricks I know to score points and take backs and, hit chokes or whatever. But until he asks me about it, I want to be able to coach him or to funnel him into a place where he is not afraid of anybody, be it a bigger person or even a conversation with somebody that he doesn't know. And that motivated me to really go after like the combatives program and try to master that, because it is a very, very concise yet complete self-defense program for virtually anybody.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I ended up meeting Chris. Is I worked on the combatives by myself for a pretty long time, like maybe 6 months. And it's different from competition, because in competition, grips are priority. Grips are everything. In a self-defense fight, distance management is everything. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 15 years at that point. I had no idea. And so I had to seek out some help, and that's how I got involved with Chris and the affiliates in Scottsdale, Chandler, and Phoenix. Awesome. The Gracie Academy affiliates. And man, when I went from there and I met Henner and Hiron, and I always kind of had my doubts about, what were their motivations and why did they think they could sell jiu-jitsu online or teach jiu-jitsu online. And when I met them and I kind of started getting to know them, I was like, okay, this isn't about money to these guys. This is about the mission, the same desire that I had profoundly developed, which was to give jiu-jitsu to the people who need it the most and as many people as possible. Mm-hmm. And, when you do that, when you have that pure kind of intention, you end up, you can end up developing a career off of it, of course, because there are going to be a lot of people interested in it. But more importantly than that, people will want to learn jiu-jitsu from you, and you can help as many people, more people than you could have ever dreamed of.
Right.
You know, and I'm not saying that competition doesn't have many, many benefits as well, but there are far more people that could benefit just from exposure to jiu-jitsu than could benefit from the benefits of competition.
I like what you're saying there, because not to take away from competition. Competition can be a fun and rewarding thing, and it's not a question of this or that, like some people try to make it. It's what's your biggest priority now, and for you. It was competition for many years, and then certain things, including the birth of your son, changed that perspective, and I can relate. And again, it doesn't mean, like you said, the way you put it was, if your son reaches a time and wants to learn about competing, great, you're all about teaching him. But what could you give him if he only trained for 6 months? What kind of foundation could you give him that's really going to carry him through his life and make the biggest impact for him? So I like how you put that, and how that became your focus. And about Henner and Hedron, I think there's a lot of misunderstandings from people before they meet them or really see what they're all about in the academy. It's easy to kind of judge something from the outside, but when you really get to know it, you learn a lot more about what they're really about. So,
they're working. When they're online or putting out a promotional video or something, they're trying to inspire people to train jiu-jitsu. And personally, I don't think they really care that much where somebody trains. I don't think they care at all, really. They just want people in jiu-jitsu.
Right.
And more importantly than that, they want people to stay in jiu-jitsu. And I think, that's what they have really been able to do, is create a system that allows people an easier way to get involved and then to stay in jiu-jitsu forever. And on top of that, you're constantly learning the most effective way to defend yourself, not necessarily the most effective way to score points or achieve a submission in a tournament, but that can be learned if you so desire, right? You can't, but it's kind of like learning one doesn't necessarily make you very good at the other,
right?
Without practice.
It's true. Very true.
So they're great. I'm a big fan.
Absolutely. Me too. So after you're embracing and looking into and embracing the combatives program, you decided to move forward and complete the ICP, the instructor certification program. So speak just a little bit about what that was like for you, please.
Yes. It was interesting. It was like, I kind of got into combatives and through having to change my thinking, my mindset a lot, I kind of developed it was like learning a new skill when I had a relatable skill already. I just had to change the way that I thought. And because I had to change, I had to do all that kind of mental chess, I guess, with my philosophy on jiu-jitsu. It made me really get deep into the philosophy behind the techniques. And once I kind of wrapped my mind around that, it became easier to explain to people, why we're doing this that way or why we're doing this that way. And, once I got to that point, it was just a natural progression to decide hey, I'm going to go and learn how to teach this. And because the most impressive thing or the most surprising thing was how good all these lower belts were at teaching. Because when I first came over, Chris was a purple belt, and then Adam at the Phoenix Academy was also a purple belt, and Michael was at the Chandler Academy was a blue belt. And they all had very highly refined teaching methodologies. And, I have trained at a lot of places around the world, and it was like they were able to convey a lot of knowledge or a lot of instruction without confusing people, without overwhelming people. And I would look around the room and just, be really amazed at the difference between what some people were capable of and what these guys were capable of. And I was like, I want to learn this. And it turns out that it's just an amazing teaching system. So it's not like these guys are just like phenoms or exceptional people. They are great people. They're amazing people, but they're not like just phenoms in terms of teaching. They've learned a system that allows them to, it's like a vehicle to deliver the information to people, and it's very, very effective. I never had been taught how to instruct on jiu-jitsu, and that's nobody's fault, but it's just that there's no clear system anywhere else in the community. And so once I realized that was a thing, that it was like you could learn how to teach and be very good at it. And I considered myself a very good teacher, but I had no idea how good I could actually be. I had produced competition champions already, and but I didn't know how to teach so that literally everybody could learn jiu-jitsu. And that's their big thing, is teaching in a way that even the weakest, or even the kids with the worst attention spans or whatever, are capable of learning and retaining jiu-jitsu knowledge. And it was kind of a natural progression for me once I really started to understand the philosophy and see the effectiveness. And there's a guy, Ken Offrich, is one of the people that helped me prepare for the instructor program. He has a master's degree in education from Harvard. And what he told me was he learned as much from this instructional program from the Gracie Academy as he learned from getting his master's at Harvard in education. Because there's like when the focus is on a pinpointed thing, and you really prepare, which is what I think Henner and Hiron have really done. They've like, and their father Horion, they've prepared this methodology, this system, so that it's essentially nobody can be left out.
Right.
And when that's your focus, man, I think that you can develop an amazing system, and they did that. And to this day, I still haven't seen anything else that even comes close to rivaling that in terms of how to help people learn to teach jiu-jitsu. And because of that, I'm going through the Women Powered Instructor Program next week. I'll be out there for that, and just trying to continue my journey and trying to help more people through that. And I'm really looking forward to what they have in store for me out there next week.
Wonderful. I couldn't agree more with what you said. And the guy who just mentioned that has the master's degree in education from Harvard. I don't have a master's from Harvard, but I have a master's in nursing with an education specialty, and I certainly feel the same way. I went through it, and I was like just blown away with the amount of detail and the clarity that they are able to break it down and make it so accessible.
What's crazy?
What's that?
Going through that I feel like it made me a 100% better father.
Wow.
Because I apply the teaching methodologies to the way I handle my son.
That's great.
And it's enriched our relationship, and it's made me more confident with how I teach and interact with my son. And that alone was worth the price of admission.
Yeah, absolutely.
10 times over.
That's so true. You see yourself or find yourself applying these things, these techniques and these methodologies and philosophies in various parts of your life, which is amazing. It's wonderful.
True.
Yeah, that's great, man. So after that, I know recently you were part of the, I guess, first official. Hiron did the Jiu Jitsu Lifestyle Summit, and you were part of that. And so let us know about what that was like and what you gleaned from that, and just fill us in on that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Like, I think about that all the time, because it was like a huge, for me, it was like a huge cathartic group therapy session for like a few days.
Right.
Like, I'm addicted to that, being around the jiu-jitsu people who have this jiu-jitsu for life mindset. And I think that was kind of the theme of the whole thing, is how can we like practice jiu-jitsu like on the mats and in our lives so that we can live the most efficiently, have a balanced life, have a balanced training regimen, and what are the things that are going to allow us to be doing jiu-jitsu like Elio when we're 93, 94 and rolling with our grandchildren. And, I'm so happy I found this when I did, because, my body's really banged up, and I had seriously considered quitting jiu-jitsu for a while. And, being around all these other people who are into that was really good for me, who are into the jiu-jitsu for life was really good for me. Hiron brought some amazing speakers. This guy, Kalani Butch, he's an investment guy, but he talked about life. He talked about, investing in your relationships, investing in people, as though everything is kind of like an account. And that really rang a bell in my head, and made me evaluate how I spend my time with my son and the people in my life. And, I met some amazing people. I met Don Cook, who's, man, he's a really interesting guy. He's really good. Everybody there had a great heart, and it just made me want, for the first time in a long time, it made me want to get to know people better.
Wow.
And so it was a profound experience for me. The jiu-jitsu is funny, because the jiu-jitsu side of it was almost like second to everything, to everything else that we talked about on the mat. And I learned some cool techniques and whatever, but I mentioned to Hiron, I think later on, that, I've done a lot of tournament camps and worlds camps and stuff like that, where you go and train somewhere for a couple of weeks or whatever to prepare for a tournament. And it's similar to what he did, but the nature of it is very different. It's very competitive. It's very hard, and you kind of get broken down in the process. And the big difference is that we focused so much on life and so much on balance and happiness and what it takes to have a communicative relationship and a meaningful relationship with another human being, and how you should look at yourself. And it was just it wasn't even about jiu-jitsu for me.
So instead of focusing on kind of sharpening your sword for battle, it was more about living a loving life. And as jiu-jitsu is a basis, but connecting with people and growing and learning and developing in your life. And you mentioned Don Cook. Let me, by the way, if you haven't heard the Jiu Jitsu Lifestyle Summit episode, certainly go back and check that out. Hiron recaps it in depth, and several of the other people that were there talk about their experience as well. So check that out. One of the people that spoke on that is Don Cook, and he told a story about you and your mother, and you having trouble trying to get your mother, who works at a very, dangerous school, and you were trying to get her interested in jiu-jitsu and having trouble, and you guys had a good conversation about that. So for those of us who did hear that, give us a recap. What happened after that? Did she ever start or develop any interest or what?
Yeah, my mom, she's a teacher at she teaches junior ROTC in some high schools and on the East Coast, and she's worked at some inner city schools. And it's always been a concern for me, because she's a smaller, older lady now. And, my whole career, she hasn't really wanted me to, bring jiu-jitsu around the house, because she's seen me compete before, and she knows how dangerous that is. And she just kind of saw it as something ugly. And Don gave me some great advice, and I took it to her. I went out to my sister's wedding recently, and I implemented what he said, and it worked. It worked tremendously well.
Oh, wow.
She she actually listened to me and kind of took it seriously for the first time ever, and she didn't shut me down immediately when I started talking about it. And she let me show her some moves, and then it was really cool, because I have some cousins that were there that are a few girls, and they go to college in Iowa, and they ended up voicing some concerns about sexual assault on campus and things like that, and I had already been kind of getting into the women empowered curriculum, pretty deeply. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to try Don's little thing on them, and like the little technique. And they totally bought in. And, you know, one of them wants to, you know, have me come out and do a little seminar at her campus. She, you know, runs some recreational thing. And so she really bought in. And man, I still need to talk to him about that, because I need to thank him, because it really it allowed me to bring jiu-jitsu into the house. And man, that was a huge first step for us.
That's really great. Love it.
And for me, I would gladly trade all my years of jiu-jitsu experience, everything I know about jiu-jitsu, if I could convince the women in my family to learn jiu-jitsu. You know, that's how important that is to me. So I owe him dearly for that.
Amazing. And you know what's cool is, and he shared this, and it speaks to you as well, and your openness when you go through the instructor program, or just the community at large. You know, there's not ego where this hierarchy of, not that rank doesn't matter at all, but it's not all you judge everybody solely on their rank or their ability for the beatdown. You know, he was a much lower rank than you when you went through the program, and yet he was assigned to be the person working with you, because he'd already been through the program. So it was really great, you know, that interplay, and that you were able to learn from him, as I'm sure he's learned a lot from you. So it's really, really wonderful, that dynamic at work.
Yeah, when you take competitive, the competitive mindset, kind of like it creates barriers in some regards. And when you take the competition out of it, like in self-defense jiu-jitsu, there's no competition going on, because your uki or your bad guy that's practicing with you, their goal is to make you do the move right. And your goal is to make you do the move right. Mm-hmm. So you guys have the same objective. Yes. When you're competing, my goal is to choke you, and your goal is to choke me. So we have conflicting objectives, and that's how fingers get broken. That's how knees get twisted, ankles get popped, and you know, that's how people end up quitting jiu-jitsu. Is because it's not, you know, it's just not the same objective.
That's so true. That's true. I love that philosophy. And one more Facebook post I want to quote of yours, because it speaks kind of to that whole energy, is you said, compassion instead of comparison, love instead of lust, understanding instead of undermining, faith and humanity instead of fear. These are conscious decisions we can all make. These are the qualities we should praise in each other and aspire to exemplify. And these are the characteristics we need from our leaders. So wonderful. Love that.
Thanks. Yeah. I think about how I treat, you know, my son and students, and think, you know, I want to like do my best to, you know, to embody, you know, what I say there, and exemplify that. And, you know, we're all human, and like if we don't pay attention, we can kind of like, it's easy to slip into these places where we're doing things competitively for you know, a momentary kind of gratification. And kind of what I found is, if you put 2% more effort into doing things right, and to evaluating yourself, and to the way you treat people, you can develop a lifestyle or relationships that are more meaningful in the long term, and you can make yourself a better leader. You can help somebody else become a better leader. And, you know, leadership is like one of those things that, like, you can learn it. You know, if you feel like people wouldn't follow you, or you couldn't teach anybody, that's not the case. It's just that you haven't learned how to be a teacher yet, or how to be a leader yet. And part of it is learning a mindset that, with benevolence and goodness in your heart, and the objective of uplifting other people, you can become a great leader, I think. And, you know, that I feel like I see people slipping into going the opposite direction, and working for that momentary or that temporary satisfaction or gratification. And it's not sustainable. And, I feel like if we can aspire to live a sustainable, like have sustainable relationships and live a sustainable lifestyle, we can have a much more like peaceful and loving world. And that's the kind of world I want to leave behind for my son when I'm gone, you know?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, my friend. Couldn't agree more. Listen, I'm really super glad that you're able to join me today and come on. You've acknowledged a lot of different people or mentioned different people that have had a big influence on you. Anybody else you want to mention or shout out to before we bring it to a close?
Yeah, I just want to thank my brothers and sisters for putting up with my ridiculous jiu-jitsu habit, and the instructors in the network that, you know, Don and Chris and Adam and all these guys that have kind of helped me, you know, come across and get involved in this the way I want to be. I just owe a huge debt of gratitude to them, and obviously to Henner and Hedon for creating this like amazing system that allowed me to continue my jiu-jitsu journey in the way that I think I can do for the rest of my life. I see myself doing jiu-jitsu for the rest of my life, and it's partly because of them and partly because of this system that they've created. I want to just real quick shout out to my buddy Michael Darcy, who's my first training partner. He just got his black belt recently from Vitor Shaolin Ribeiro, and a bunch of my buddies in Brazil, Arthur Gomes, Jair Lourenço. I appreciate all you guys. Agradeço muito vocês. Yeah, those are the shout outs I have. I do want to say I'm going to go do a seminar with Chris on August 19th up at Don Cook's Academy in Keego Harbor. Right. So, you know, if anybody's in that area, I'd love to have them stop by. We're going to work on how to do combatives, how to be the best bad guy, how to use combatives while you're rolling with more advanced level, higher belts, and try to give them like the best seminar we can.
Sounds great, man. Well, I appreciate it. I have much respect for you. You certainly are making a difference in the world and making an impact on lots of lives. So hats off to you, and thank you for taking the time to let us get to know more about you and your life. I really appreciate it, and I wish you a long, healthy, and happy life, sir.
Thank you, brother. Same to you. I really appreciate your time, and I respect what you're doing, and keep up the great work. It gives me something to do when I'm not on the mat.
Appreciate it very much. All righty. Take care, man.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, really enjoyed that interview with Jon Wags. What an interesting and insightful person he is. Stay tuned now for the Make a Difference, Make an Impact segment with guest host Chris Bailey, owner and head instructor of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Scottsdale.
Hi, Marty. Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be included in your Make an Impact segment and your podcast. I love what you're doing. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Bailey from the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Training Center in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I'm just kind of putting stuff together, getting ready to head back out to Torrance in the Big Ring Room next week for another ICP. And it just kind of reminds me of the value of continuing education. And so I thought it'd be cool to talk for a moment about the journey of learning and for everyone to consider the value of ongoing education. There's a great quote that I heard that's attributed to the Grand Master of Hwang-Do, my teacher, to his teacher, that I heard way back in my career that really stuck with me and has always kind of motivated me and driven me. So I thought I'd share that with everyone today. Here it is. One should never be content with their level of achievement, but rather should continuously strive to better themselves in all aspects of the study of life. Just as a mountain climber reaches the pinnacle of their goal, they then realize there are infinitely more pinnacles or goals to reach for. If, however, the climber strives for the pinnacle only to stop before attaining the goal and contentedly turns back, they are no better than those who did not attempt to climb initially. So what's the message here? You hear it all the time. Chase the knowledge. Thanks again, Marty. Everyone have an amazing day.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the show. As always, I thank you for listening. I appreciate all feedback, so if you have feedback, please don't hesitate to give it. If you have ideas for the show or for guests, please let me know about those. You can leave feedback on the website at www.graciejujitsurocks.com. You can also leave feedback on iTunes, and while you're there, make sure to rate the show. It helps us with our standing in iTunes. If you haven't liked us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter, please go ahead and do that. And don't forget to share the episodes on your Facebook and social media. Again, thanks again for listening, and until next time, this is Marty Josie, and I'll see you on the mat.